So this is my buddy's mom's car. We did some, it's got the notorious oil leak on the oil filter housing down there. You can see, let's see all the residue on the exhaust, so you can smell it. So we replaced the oil filter housing gaskets, took it apart, cleaned it, did the new gaskets. Buddy bought like a little kit on Amazon that had a bunch of the O-rings and everything in it. Obviously that didn't really fix it, or it fixed it for a little bit. It's leaking again. So going to go ahead and take this back apart, ensure that's what's still leaking. First thing we'll start, we'll remove all the stuff out of the way to get this exhaust manifold off. We want to get back behind there. That's where the oil filter housing's at. So I'm going to pull this pipe off, O2 sensor out of the way, the dipstick, pull this heat shield off. That way we can access our exhaust manifold bolts. So the manifold cover bolts are E12s, so an E-Torx. So I got the two out on top, and there's two on the bottom. One of them was rusted out and broke the last time we messed with this, so there's only one on the bottom there. So with that, this case cover should come off. So I had to get the dipstick out of the way. This just got a little O-ring on it. You just kind of twist it back and forth and pop it out. Definitely want to make sure you have a replacement O-ring when you go back together. With that manifold just came right out. And now it opens up. You can see our bolting here. Got like 10 bolts, I think, or 9 bolts. Then, our filter housing assembly is all back behind that. Then we got a bracket down there as well, holding this manifold, and the 3 bolts going to the mid pipe. So I'll probably start underneath to get the bracket undone and the mid pipe bolts off, and then come up here, take these off, and pull the manifold off. As you can see, we got a nasty oil leak going on. And that's the smell. She's smelling everything burning off the exhaust. So these are looking a little rusty. I replaced these bolts, the nuts, the last time we did this a couple years ago. They're already rusty again. So hopefully they should pop off. We'll see. Okay, so these bolts are a 13. I doused them in a little bit of like PB Blaster, so we'll see. Hopefully they should break loose. That does not feel promising. That also does not feel promising. Alright. Alright, that one came loose. We can move this. Come on, maybe. I would recommend soaking those overnight, because even with me having done this before, they still rusted really badly. Okay. I don't know, I'm going to have to get a light up here. See up. I don't know if you can see the bracket up there, but there's a bracket connected to the block itself. So 2 bolts on each side, and that should disconnect this from the cap from the block itself. So I'll go ahead and undo those, and then obviously we still have to pull the manifold bolts off up top to pull it out. Alright, those up top are E12, just like the bolts we pulled off of the heat shield. So these manifold bolts, they're 10mm. I'm just going to break them all loose. Make sure they all come out relatively easy. Had to get a swivel for this last one. It's kind of tricky. Yeah, I have to get a little bit of a contraption to get to that one. Everything else isn't too bad. So I'm gonna pull this one off first. So I was really tight. I had to use this little stubby impact, but it broke loose. I may not have removed this the last time we did this. I don't remember. I may have been able to fish it out of the bottom because it does not look like it's been pulled out before. I can't remember. So anyway, that should help. I do have this special, this is actually a special O2 sensor socket. It's got the little slit in it for the wire. So it's a 7/8, pretty universal for most O2 sensors. Alright, so looking underneath, clean all on that side, but yeah, it's definitely leaking from somewhere right in there, so there's got to be a seal or gasket or something that's just not sealing. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this housing off again. I went ahead and drained the oil. There's 3 coolant tubes. There's the one there, there's a small one there, and then this large one that runs across and goes up under there. I don't think it matters what order they come off. Obviously that small one's probably last, but I'm going to go ahead and pull this big one first. There's a Torx bit back there, same size as that. I think it's a T27. Yep, so T27s, there's one under there. So I'm going to start with this big pipe. And obviously we're going to lose coolant. Pop these 3 off and then go ahead and remove the bolts that hold that housing on. Not sure how good this camera is going to pick it up, but you can kind of see down in there up next to that, behind that shift linkage, that's where your coolant line mounts there. It's a little rusty looking Torx bit underneath there. I don't know if the GoPro could get that or not, but that is what we're pulling off. Alright, yep. So there's one of the bolts. There should be another on the other side, so fish around, see if we can feel it. I think it's... Oh, is that it? That's it. That's it. Yep, there goes the coolant. Make sure it's not. Got it. I didn't say this earlier, but I think it should go without saying, make sure you bag your hardware too. Ooh. Alright, so this pipe should just undo. I'm going to let it drain there for a little bit before I pull it off the other side so I can move my drain pan over. So I'm going to let that drain out, and then it's, you can see, it's completely loose, so it's just an O-ring here, so it'll just pop out. Alright, just wanted to show pulling this out, so just ease it. That's your hose. Ooh, looks like this O-ring is about done. And then added some tape over the holes so nothing gets in there. Now we're going to go ahead and remove this other pipe on this side. Slide that way a little bit. Again, 2 bolts, T27 Torx. They should be they shouldn't be super tight. So yeah, we got those loose. We'll have to remove the housing, and then once we pop the housing out, this line will come with it. And same with this bottom one. One of the housing bolts is what's holding that small pipe on as well. So when we remove that, we should be able to pop both of those out. So with that, we'll go ahead and start pulling these E-Torques out on that housing and pop the housing off. So those bolts are all the same size. We're going to carefully pop this out and lose oil and a lot more coolant. Mainly coolant. Alright, so while we're waiting on parts for the oil cooler, I'm going to go ahead and drop the oil pan and reseal it. Just to be on the safe side. We already got it apart anyway. So to avoid breaking any bolts on the exhaust, I'm going to try and drop the hanger. If you can see it down there, that's holding the isolators up for the exhaust, to just kind of drop it down low enough to where we can undo the pan and drop the pan. Here's just be a few E-torques and then some bigger bolts here on the side that bolt to the transmission. So I'll go ahead and get started with this exhaust, try and get it a little bit more out of the way, and then start undoing these bolts and see what we have going on. Okay, so I'm going to drop this bracket down. See under there's 2 bolts on each side that hold it up to this black piece that's connected to the subframe. The bigger one's a 15 and the smaller one's a 13. So hopefully these will come out. I'm going to use my little Milwaukee stubby impact. So all right. Well, that is not promising. That broke. Wow. Those didn't even attempt to come off. Okay, maybe we'll have better luck with the bigger ones. Alright, well that's at least promising. So yeah, just note, unfortunately, those bolts are a little rusty. I'll have to figure that out. I'm gonna have to undo the, looks like a main subframe bolt to drop that little piece out so I can drill those bolts out and replace them. Well, we'll figure that out, I guess. Alright, on to the pan. So starting off, I'm gonna pull the 2 big bolts in the side of the transmission here. These are 15s, and they're not too bad. Not too bad at all. So obviously, if you're doing an oil pan without removing the exhaust manifold and stuff, you could still undo the pipe, the 3-bolt flange here, and then drop like I did and drop it out of the way, and you should be able to do all this with the manifold still on. I'm going to start on the front, just loosen what I can see. So it looks like we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the front. So these are E10s. So we'll go ahead and just kind of break them loose. Alright, I'll get to the ones on the back. And finally, it's hard to see, but you can barely see it. There's one up underneath the crank pulley there. Alright, so I just used a a swivel in my E10. I was able to fit it in there. It'll definitely help if you have a flex handle ratchet like that, for sure. So I won't put this ahead of me pulling the rest of these out. There are 2 more bolts up in those holes there. They're E10s. I actually had to go out and buy another skinny 1/4 inch drive E10 socket, because out of the 3 sets of E-Torques I have, all the E10s were 3/8 drive and it wouldn't fit in that hole. So now we got this. We'll pull those last 2 out, and then we can pry the pan off. Now we'll go ahead and see if we can pry this down now. There it goes. Yeah, once all the bolts are out, it pries down a lot easier. So move the car to the shop, because we're going to have to lift the motor. So I got this lifting beam. Obviously we've got to move the airbox out of the way, undo the bolts on this motor mount down here, and hopefully should just be able to lift this side up to be able to clear the oil pan. So I'll put it back up temporarily, but there's a little piece inside there on this side next to the subframe, of course, that will not allow you to pull the oil pan out. So we have to lift the motor up and be able to maneuver the pan out and down. So if your pan's not leaking that bad, or if it's just seeping, I probably wouldn't recommend doing the pan, because this turned into a lot more work than I was expecting. I didn't realize we'd have to lift the motor to get that out. So first things first, we're going to remove the air box. So pull that hose clamp here. Looks like a couple Phillips. Interesting that they're held with Phillips screws. And do this hose here in our MAF sensor. And then have to look and see how the bottom box is. I'm assuming it's bolted in somehow. So just get all this out of the way so we can get to our motor mount. So it looks like it feeds into a little area there. And we got a little hose we got to disconnect here. This just pulls out. And then it appears just to be in rubber grommets, so it should just pop up, I think. I don't see any bolts holding it in. Yeah, there's a rubber grommet on the back side here. Rubber grommet here. So let's mess with it. So that exposes our motor mount. So probably wanting to undo, I believe, this bolt here, and probably our 2 main bolts here into the frame. And we'll try and wrap the chain around this mount here and try and lift up. This is super sketch. Put a block of wood across there. Got the block of wood across here and got it up. About to find out if it's going to be enough. And some light. You can see that piece. That's what it's hanging on. So, the question is, do we have enough? just barely. Okay. All right, pan is out. Terrible, terrible design. So yeah, that bullhead, they just had to put that right over the subframe. So anyway, we'll get this cleaned up, clean the pan up, put some new Hondabond on it, and stick it back up and never touch it again. Okay, we got our pan all cleaned up all the way around. Our bolts cleaned up. And then underneath here. So we're going to put some silicone on the four corners where these pieces meet up. So two on the back, and then here in the front and here in the front. And then we'll silicone the pan and make sure we want to silicone on the pan around our oil pickup. But be careful not to overdo it to get it. You don't want silicone getting inside there. Add a little bit on here since it's the harder side to get on in case it smears. Just a light coat. Alright, the pan is on. Got the bolts snug. You can see the Hondabond kind of poking out the sides there. So we're going to go ahead and torque these to 89 inch-pounds. And then your these were M10s, M10 transmission bolts, get torqued to 30 foot-pounds. Could not find a sequence or anything, but typically start inside out. So I'll start in the center and torque towards the outside. Alright, putting in our M10s. foot-pounds. Okay, with the pan tight, we're going to move on to our motor mount that we had loosened. So we loosen these bolts down here and then the nut. So the bolts and nut to body are 46 foot-pounds. If you loosen these over here or anything on this side of the mount to the bracket, those are like a 37 foot-pound with you have to do like multiple passes and do a degree torque on it, like 60 and 70 degrees. But we didn't touch those, so we're just doing the 46 foot-pounds on these. Alright, now we're going to put the airbox back in, reverse order of how we took it out. We got the filter housing and cooler assembly off. Got our new gasket on. This isn't leaking. We replaced this last time. This seems to be holding up. So typically you'd pull that off and you'd be able to replace it with this gasket. We're not gonna pull that off since it's fine. If you do, these bolts are 71 inch-pounds torqued up. So went ahead and we actually bought an actual GM gasket for this one because this is the one that was leaking. Otherwise we got this FEL-PRO kit. So that guy's in there. So now we're going to get our new gaskets on our hoses here. So we got new O-rings, everything. We'll get those together and then go ahead and bolt this back on. Cleaned up our holes as good as we could get it. So we got our rings in. So these two, obviously, they got to go on the cooler when you install it, and then our big pipe here you can put on after. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of grease around these O-rings, just so they'll slide in easy and not tear. And then probably just do a dab of oil around these. Alright, we got our two pipes slid on. Make sure our gaskets are seated and haven't moved. Alright, we got our cooler in, snugged up. Our pipes are in. I had to use the pry bar to push that one in. Make sure you grease your O-rings so they slide in better. We'll torque this to 18 foot-pounds, and then the two little bolts here on this coolant hose are 71 inch-pounds. Alright, that's all torqued up. Next we're going to install our long hose. Got the seals lubed up with some grease. This one's kind of difficult because you can't really see back behind the deal there. Again, the seals are really tight. I had to shove that in there. I knocked the camera over, but popped in. I'm fishing these bolts in here. Alright, and these are 71 inch-pounds as well. Okay, new seals in. Coolant pipes are all tight and snug. Our housing's snug. We'll go ahead and have a new oil filter. I'll go ahead and put that in and torque that to 25 Newton meters. Get that torqued up, and then we can start assembling the exhaust manifold back on. So I cleaned up as much grease as I could off of this. So that was one of the main concerns, is it smells like burning oil. So I'll slide this guy right down in there. I'm going to add anti-seize. Again, I always do anti-seize on exhaust hardware. Anything that gets hot, I believe it helps so it doesn't get stuck. So I'll probably just add some anti-seize in these nuts. And we'll go ahead and snug it down and torque it. Got all the exhaust bolts in. I'm going to start snugging them up. I'm going to start inside out. So center, snug up, and then just work my way around. The O2 sensor torques to 31 foot-pounds. I'm also going to apply a light amount of anti-seize on the threads on this as well. So I got this bracket kind of loose. So the manifold's tight. I'm gonna snug it up to the manifold, and then I'll tighten it to the block. So yeah, snug it up so I can get the height, and then tighten it to the block, and then tighten it to the manifold. Alright, these are 15 foot-pounds. I'm going to torque what I can. Alright, next, maneuvering the shield into place. Fairly easy. We'll pop one bolt there, and then we got to put our dipstick on. I just pushed it down and twisted a little bit, and you'll feel it snap in, like it'll pop. So that's in now. Alright, so that bolt here should be 11 foot-pounds according to the manual. I'm just going to do this other one the same. Okay, so the bolts that I broke off earlier when I did this, went ahead. The nut and washer on the back end of this thing was, I guess, welded or a part of it, so I went ahead and I just cut it completely off on both sides, and then picked up a lock nut and a collared bolt from Ace Hardware to replace that with. So I pulled these off and cut those off, painted it so it won't rust, and now I'm just going to replace it with new hardware. And then we'll get the exhaust mounted up, and then bolt it to the manifold, pour our fluids in, and hopefully check for leaks, and there's no leaks. So now we're going to go ahead and pressure wash up underneath, get all the oil, residue, and everything out. That way if something is still leaking, we'll be able to see. Obviously don't want to leave all the old oil on there, then you'll still have drips and you won't know if you actually fixed your problem or not. So fortunately it's fairly clean since we did the oil pan as well. Looks like she's got a little bit of a transmission leak or something going on there. Not sure what that is. The main issue is obviously the housing leaking onto the exhaust. Make it nice and smelly. Sorry, I'm spinning the camera around. Yeah, unfortunately it's very hard to see the case up there, or the cooler up there, the filter housing, because you got that bracket in the way and everything. But again, like, we cleaned the oil pan and everything when we resealed it, so we'll just do it. This shouldn't be too bad. Just do a quick spray down with some simple green, pressure wash under here, just get it all cleaned up, and then that way they can drive it, and if something's still leaking or if it's coming from another area, we'll be able to tell. We'll get this spray down. Should go without saying, don't spray your computer over here or any of that. Just try and keep it concentrated to just the areas underneath where the oil is. It's funny I mentioned don't spray the computer thing, because there's big deals on here that say, there's big pictures on here that say do not pressure wash these areas. So yeah, went ahead and simple greened underneath there, let it sit for a minute. Also did the little panel, so we'll clean up the oil on that before we put that back on. Then go ahead and fill up the coolant a little more, run the coolant, make sure it's fully burped, and then drive it and double check and make sure we don't have any issues. Okay, just took it for like a 20-minute drive. Coolant's good. No leaks down there from where we did the O-rings on the coolant hoses. Coming underneath. Oil pan looks all dry. Nothing on this side, so I think we're looking good. We'll just have her drive it more and just do periodic checks on it. But it should be good to go.